Hello and welcome to another Amati Insights call. As a reminder, we do this every 2 weeks, and we pick a subject which we think is important for investors to understand, where we have opinions and some investment consequences in our portfolio resulting from those opinions. But of course, this is not a recommendation to buy any stock or any fund, so please do your own research and seek professional advice where necessary. With that, the topic today, the title today is "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?" A pragmatic look at humanoid robotics and physical AI. And I enjoy saying these things because for those of you that don't know, this is the science fiction book behind the Blade Runner movies, the 1980s science fiction classic, which had a sequel a few years ago. One of my favorite movies, dare I say. And it's very topical because humanoid robotics is all over the news. We just had a CES trade show in the US, the biggest consumer electronics show in the world, where physical AI and human, which is the fancy new name for robotics, is all over the place. Lots of robots, lots of keynote speeches, 30-minute plus wait to look at Boston Dynamics Atlas, which was the star of the show. So, and even before this event, we've seen and heard pretty big statements from leading commentators and technology entrepreneurs like Elon Musk or Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, talking about billion-plus robots working amongst us. At the same time, we go to a lot of trade shows where practical engineers tell us nobody needs humanoid robots. That's what we've heard just a few months ago from one of the industrial engineers in one of the shows. So, do we? We are pragmatic investors in innovation. We like, as we sometimes call it, future that's already here, just not even distributed, things that are already creating profitable cash generative business models, and not a hypothetical world of tomorrow. So how does that apply to robotics?
Yeah, I mean it's a very good question. I mean, obviously robotics is not a new issue. It's been around for a long time, decades, and some aspects of it have become quite commodity now. So we go to, as you kind of alluded to, we go to a lot of industrial shows. Every year we go to the largest, probably industrial technology show in the world in Hannover Messe. And walking around that show, you see that everybody pretty much has their own robotic arm now. 5 years ago that was interesting. Now everyone's got one. And so, what we have to do is look deeper into kind of other industrial use cases and where there's value. And obviously, there are lots of robots already on production lines, from the kind of very big ones that people will have seen, often quite dangerous robots that are in cages that do welding and pressing and painting and this kind of thing. And then moving more recently to things called cobots, which are smaller, typically more agile, and able to work beside humans, so in a safer way. And also increasingly we're seeing things like autonomous mobile robots in warehouses, which kind of move pallets around or bring boxes and shelves to workers. So there are a lot of different areas. One that people don't think about often is in pharmaceutical R&D. So more and more of pharmaceutical R&D is being automated, particularly and in areas like diagnostics. And there are some interesting companies that provide products there. We own shares in one of them, actually, a Swiss-listed company called Tican, and they do liquid handling robots. And to the outside sort of view, they look a bit like cupboards, but inside there are a lot of technical, very sensitive equipment that moves vials and pipettes around using robotics. So there are lots of different things. Humanoid robotics are not the only way forward for kind of investing, as far as we're concerned. And the purpose of this conversation is about physical AI, and increasingly these machines that we're talking about are using AI. It's being used for training and operation, because it makes the machines much simpler to set up. So setup times are quicker, and it provides much more flexibility if the machine has some concept of understanding of what it's doing and the kind of task it's been given. Increasingly, the industry talks about this as Industry 5.0. So we've gone from 4.0, now we're in 5.0, and this is the world where the whole factory starts to be thought of as a robot. An entire production line kind of is software defined and automatable and becomes much more flexible. So there are things like going from a fixed conveyor belt in the past to now having reconfigurable production lines that can literally reconfigure themselves around tasks through the day or through the weeks. And we're seeing examples of this now. A step in that direction, actually, Siemens has built a production factory for Audi, which is very much software defined. So it's happening, but it's still relatively early days for physical AI.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, we do see humanoids. Well, not so much humanoids, maybe, but what the industry calls quadrupeds, the robotic dogs, if you like, that are doing some industrial work and and doing some tasks, outdoor tasks like security or in defense applications. So, in this emerging area of robotics, who are the pioneers that you're interested in?
Well, I mean, it's we look at a lot of them. The problem is, from our perspective, and people who don't know the way we think about investing on the fund, we look at innovation from the perspective of pioneers, enablers, and adopters. So we're specifically talking about pioneers here, which are the kind of early stage companies that are often the leaders in developing the technology. And there are some great names here. People will have heard of what you mentioned earlier, Boston Dynamics and their Atlas robot. Really interesting business, but it's had quite a complex journey so far as from an investment standpoint. It's changed hands a number of times and was most recently sold by SoftBank into Hyundai. So they own it outright, but it's a relatively small part of a big business. So not an easy way for us to get direct access. China has a company called Unitree, which is, again, a great robotics company many of you will have heard of, but it's private, so we can't invest in it. And the other one that sort of is the headline pioneer, if you like, is Tesla with the Optimus robot. Tesla is not really making any money out of that yet, so it doesn't really fit our investment approach. It's still more of a science project in our kind of way of thinking. So we are looking at a lot of other areas. Defense is a really interesting area for using AI in robotics and things like sort of battlefield robots and subsea autonomous drones. But so far, a lot of those companies are private, and so we haven't found any great pioneers that are investable for us at the moment.
Yeah, I guess the other thing you've alluded to, which we want to expand on a bit more, is if now that robotics is called physical AI, what does AI change for this application? And we see two areas which are quite consequential for us where AI makes a difference in robotics. I could call them instruction and perception. Instruction and training, I should say, is it's about telling robots what to do and how you do it. Robots used to be coded, and the coding languages that I use in robotics are this archaic, complex things: G code, rapid, KRL, or CARL, the two different things. And there are a set of instructions that sometimes were developed and standardized in the 1980s. They sometimes are specific to a particular robot maker like KUKA or FANUC or ABB. There are not very many people who can code well in those languages. And AI is changing this game in the same way it's changing traditional coding. You've all heard about low code, no code, vibe coding type frameworks where you tell the computer what you want and it builds you an app. Well, the robotics is going the same way. You can tell the robot what you want the robot to do, and AI engine interprets your verbal instructions or written instructions into a set of actions, almost like Lego bricks sticking together the robot action doing what you need it to do. But it also democratizes robots training without specific instruction. For example, in machine vision for quality control, which is kind of a adjacent area, it used to be rules-based. You used to have to specifically say, okay, we want this tolerances, this angles, this measurements that mean good. And now, the automated quality control system needed to check for those. Now you can just present to an AI algorithm lots of objects that are high quality and lots of objects that are low quality, and the machine figures that out. And same is happening with physical motion. So the training, instructing robots is becoming a lot easier in the world of AI. But the other thing is perception. Is this digital creatures, if you like, they're going to be more active in all their shapes and sizes in more production settings. They need to sense the world around them. They need to see and feel things. This kind of thinking machines, if you like. And I can't help but remember that the scene from Blade Runner, which has become iconic, where these robots are trying to figure out what's going to happen to them and trying to make their way to this mysterious Tyrell corporation that made them, and they're trying to get there through an eye designer. They found this guy who's designed and made their eyes, and they're in this in his artisanal, if you like, workshop where he's making these eyes and in amongst sort of liquid nitrogen and steaming machines and all that. So the question is, who makes eyes for our robots? Where do we find an artisanal eye maker for humanoids of tomorrow?
Yeah, it's been an area we've really focused on because it's a classic enabler, if you like, for what we're talking about. So, and these are often very profitable companies that have been around for a long time. Because the thing is, the eyes are industrial cameras basically, and we've been using industrial cameras or machine vision on production lines for decades, and they've become much cleverer and incorporating a lot more AI. And again, goes back to that speeded up setup times, etc. But the two companies we own on the fund, and these are two standout leaders in this area. One is Cognex, which is listed in the US, and the other is Basler, which is listed in Germany. And these guys are, from our perspective, they're a great way to play this sort of physical AI expansion, because they don't really care who the winners are ultimately. They're suppliers to lots of different companies across the ecosystem.
The other sensor category that we're really excited about is the all the sensors that enable the touch and the motion, which are actually connected in many ways. If you look at some of these videos of these robots, for example, the same Boston Dynamics Atlas, you'll see they have a lot of joints, and those joints actually have more degrees of freedom than human joints. They can stand and walk and sit and jump in pretty weird ways that humans can't do. So they are, the motion dynamics of this machines are much greater than ours. And of course, the same applies to everything all the way to a single arm on a production line. Now, those machines, those arms, those joints, at any point need to know which angle they're positioned at, which speed they're rotating at, linearly what coordinates they're at, so they can feed it back to the system and be self-aware in terms of their positioning. And it turns out there's a specific category of this motion, angle, and speed sensors, very different physics, very different type of semiconductor device, and they're already very widely used in automotive applications. So if you think about components of drivetrain, steering, and braking in the car, same challenges of knowing where you are, which angle you're at, which speed you're moving with, have been solved for increasingly, I wouldn't say autonomous yet, but certainly driver-assisted vehicle applications. And there's a company called Allegro Microsystems, which is another holding in our portfolio, which I would say dominates that space. And they are increasingly and more confidently talking about the robotics opportunity. In fact, we believe they are already a supplier to Boston Dynamics, that star of the show at the CES conference the other day, and indeed to some of the leading Chinese humanoid and quadruped robots. It's not yet a big business for them, but if that market happens, this could be a very interesting expansion opportunity.
Yes, and looking at time, we've just gone a little bit over time here, but just so to wrap this up, I mean, we do really think this is an exciting, growing industry, and we're very keen to be invested here. But we're not, as people who know us would expect, we're not getting distracted by the kind of hype of billions of humanoid robots at some point. We're looking for these profitable, high-quality, growing businesses that have a real moat and a real sort of technology advantage. And obviously, we found that through the camera and the and the equipment makers you mentioned, like Allegro. So hopefully these guys will benefit regardless of whether it turns out that humanoids or quadrupeds or whatever it is that is the winner in the long run, and that's where we're positioned. But we're out of time, as I say. So please, if you have any views or questions or want to follow up with anything, our contact details are on the website. But otherwise, we will speak to you hopefully in a couple of weeks.